Hi, today I'm going to talk about exams, and there are 6 things I'm going to cover in this talk. So the first is getting organised, in other words, preparation before you even start thinking about doing any revision. Then I'm going to talk about revision in terms of there being 2 sides to it. It's my strong belief that when you're revising for exams, there are actually 2 things you've got to take care of with that. After that, then we'll talk about preparation for the exam, that there are actually things to think about and do to help prepare for the actual exam, which varies from exam to exam. Then we're going to look at on the day when you're actually, things to think about when you're actually in the room or you're waiting to go into the room to take your exam. We'll also mention other avenues of support and help out with this video. And again, as it says here, when good exams go bad, and it can happen, and sometimes it may not actually be any fault of your own, what do you do then? Okay, so let's get started. So it's really useful to take a step back and look at exams in overview. And remember that exams are about the whole module. The exams that you take will generally have content that will spread across much of the module. Secondly, with all assessments, exams are no different. You have to show us that you know and you understand what you've been taught by answering a select question. That doesn't change. However, a lot of people think of exams as obstacles, as barriers, as threats that they have to pass this, they have to get over this obstacle. And I don't think that's right. I think that if you've been to the lectures and you've been to the seminars and you do know and you do understand what you've been taught, then you can treat an exam as an opportunity, not an obstacle, an opportunity for you to write and express the depth of your understanding. And if you can think of exams in this way as an opportunity, not a barrier, not an obstacle, then I think it really changes how you feel about them and would hopefully increase your confidence. Okay, so let's move on and let's start looking at how you're going to organise. Organisation is key for an exam, and for me, there are 2 things that you really have to think about trying to organise. One is your time, the time you have left, and the second one is the things that you're going to use to revise. So it's the resources you have to hand, lecture notes, books, essays, presentations, whatever form it comes in, you've got those to hand. Let's look at that in more detail. Some of you may have seen this before. I use this kind of grid for general planning, and I think it counts here too, that you want to get a grid, days of the week, times in the day, and then, as I've said previously, first off, you mark off all the times that you know you can't study for whatever reason. I mean, these exams are in January, so it's arguable that you're not going to be studying on Christmas Day or Boxing Day, perhaps, or whatever else that's occupying you over that period or that break. If you're going home to see people, or you're not going to be studying then, so you immediately score them out, and that leaves you with the windows of time to study that you have, and lets you plan ahead and see that you've actually got how many hours you've actually got to study, and then what are you going to study when, and lay it out before you start, rather than doing it in an ad hoc or an unplanned way. So I'd thoroughly recommend trying to do that in some detail to let you know when you're going to open your books. And the next thing you want to do, of course, is to look at all the things that you have that you may resort to revise. So you'll have a certain amount of resources, notes, as I've got here, notes, handouts, there might be PowerPoint slides, written text, books, journals. So you want to gather those together, and you want to gather them for each module. Once you have everything you need, you want to clear everything else from your study area away. So it's only the things that you need. And again, having a clear desk, having things in some kind of organization over it will give you a confidence boost that you're ready to go, you're ready to start revising. Really important points I want to make about exams that sometimes people don't quite take on board. This revision is for a closed book exam. When you are reacting in real time to a specific question, and you very much have a limited time to answer that question, and that's what presents the key issues make up this revision. And the first one is you have a limited amount of time to do what you need to do. That becomes key. So you have to be able to work with that. You have to realize what you can do in that time. And the second one is you have a specific question that you've to answer. So you have to make sure that you've got some ability to deconstruct and understand that question quite quickly so that you know what you write is going to answer it, because exams at university are not write all you know about. It may have worked previously, but it's not a good strategy here because the questions will be quite specific. If you write all you know, you may put down things that are not relevant, and anything that's not relevant will get you few or no marks. And that's really, really important. The other point I want to make is the third point is that reading pages of notes is ineffective. I used to walk through the cafeteria, the refectory, the library, and I would be looking at people getting ready to go into exams, and I felt they were looking at lots of material, trying to get that to go in, pages and pages of information. And I feel that it's not useless, but it's not the most effective way to do it. And by my mind, you should be looking at something much smaller, much less, which is just going to give you the prompt to answer in. So the two things that you need to do to have that you pack up what you need to know into something small and memorable. That's the first thing you have to do. You have to pack it the same way you pack up to go on holiday. Organize everything into a suitcase till you get where you're going, and then you unpack it and you use it as you need it. But there's a point in time where you have to reduce it, pack it up, make it small, take it with you, and then unpack again. That's exactly the same principle I feel you should use in exams, which is that you reduce and reduce and reduce your information, keeping the meaning of it, but reducing the size of things that you're looking at, and then unpack it once you get into the exam. And the second thing that absolutely ties into this is that you've got to practice using the knowledge that you're packed up to answer questions. So one is reducing the information you know down to something small that you can unpack later. And the second thing is to make sure that you practice using the knowledge to answer questions. Both of them are required to be successful in exams. One thing that a lot of people talk about with exams when it doesn't go right is they say, my question never came up. And what I would say to that is, and it is a frightening thing when you have an expectation and it doesn't arrive, that the mistake there is people revise for questions. And what I would recommend is you study areas, not questions, so that you have more knowledge than you need, but you'll have the knowledge enough to answer any question that comes up. So study areas, not questions. And that's what I want to move on to. So successful exam answers. If it's the result of reacting to the exam question, when you're revising, rather than anticipating a question and writing a prepared answer that you memorize, it's a very common way about going about it. My argument would be, why not construct building block paragraphs, a whole range of building block paragraphs that you can then assemble and construct an answer that fits the question. So when you have a prepared answer, there's only really one thing there's one question it can answer. And if the question differs in any way as it can do, then you're going to be stuck. But if you just have these groups of paragraphs that you know, that you have at your fingertips that you can write, then you can look at and choose which paragraph you need to answer any given question. And therefore, your answer will be far better tailored and have far better content for that question. And I want to take you through that in one way, in a way that I see that you could do this. So when we look at modules, we know that a module's not this big singular thing, but you can absolutely see that it has certain areas within it. When you look at the lectures in a module, what you will find is that you can break those down into certain areas. Now, I'm going to take a theoretical module, and I'm going to say that overall, the module will have six areas that a certain number of areas that you can study. So once you've decided, or once you've broken it down and saying these are the rough areas that may or may not come up in the form of some kind of question, then you could start to look at and revise one of these. And I want to show you how to revise one particular area. So let's look at, for example, here, area A. So when you get to the first part of that, what you have to do is you have to get all the information you have, as I said before, all the notes, all the handouts, all the PowerPoint slides, all the written texts, and start to sort them out. And my argument would be that when you start to look at that part of the module, but when you look at the things that are in that, I like to think that there's a certain amount. I'm not saying it's going to be 12, but there may be up to 12 things that you can write about. And when you start to look and see that the different things that are talked about in that area within the lecture, etc., or a couple of lectures, then you can identify things that stand out that become a part of that. Now, it may be less than that. The important thing is to say these are the parts, okay? So you've got all your resources that tend to explain or let you understand what each part means, and you group those together. So if we go back, if you're looking at the first part of area A, the first thing you need to do, and you have to do this with all of them, is you've got to look at all your resources in whatever form they are and convert them to notes. So this is the first reduction. And it may be that you have perhaps notes from lectures as a good starting point as well, but my argument would be that you try and make these notes more comprehensive. You try to make these notes fairly accurate. You maybe want to try and introduce little themes or little small points that you want to make. The important thing is you have notes that really strongly represent all the resources that you've managed to find, and you would repeat this. You would repeat this for each part. So the first thing is you've got books and PowerPoints, etc. What I'm saying is you convert that to notes, handwritten or typed notes that you have. And to be honest, when you are making these notes, I think it would be useful exercise for you to write your notes. In fact, I would ask you to move to writing most things at this point, because you're going to be writing for 2 hours, and when's the last time you wrote for 2 hours? So strengthening your wrists or getting your writing, or just getting back into the way of writing if you don't write much. Okay, so what you've done then is you have a series of notes that represent that much bigger area. So you've made one reduction where you've kind of said, this is all the information I have, and now I've reduced it to everything I know. For me, the next part then is to take the notes and try and get together a paragraph to represent that, to represent all the essential things that are in that. And again, this is a further reduction. This is a further summarizing that you do. And we start to look at these further summarizes, these paragraphs, as the building blocks that you're going to use. So you start to get a paragraph for the first part, second part, third part. And then finally, we're not done yet, but once you've got all your paragraphs written out, you then get a revision card. You get either a card or a bit of paper. And the final thing you do is you write a phrase that matches or has some kind of indication of what the paragraph's about. So just at this point, I'm going to say that this module was actually about an international marketing strategy. Okay, so we're looking at international marketing strategy. So the first paragraph I've got is what is an international marketing strategy. The second paragraph says what is in it, what are the elements of it, and the third paragraph is how would you apply it, what are the applications that you can use that for. So then let's look at the next, because then you do that again, then you'll take 4, 5, 6, and then you'll convert them to paragraphs 4, 5, and 6. I'm just going through it again just to reinforce the point. So you've got the next 3 paragraphs, you've condensed that down, you write the paragraph that you're going to use in your answer, but again, what you do is you start to move on to the revision card and you say, what is paragraph 4 about? Well, it's the benefit of using an international marketing strategy. Paragraph 4 is the first benefit, paragraph 5 is the second benefit, and paragraph 6 is the third benefit, and they go on to your revision card. And so it goes, so that you've got, by the end up, you have your 12 parts. As you can see, the final ones were, you've got benefits in the second line, and then you've got limitations in the third line. So you've got a paragraph that tells you about a limitation, another paragraph about a second limitation, or third paragraph about the third limitation. And then you move on to talk about other things related to marketing strategies, which is positioning, markets, and channels. The important thing, the really, really important thing at this is the point I make, that if you're a fan of mind maps, then you can always do it as some form of mind map or spider diagram. If you're a visual learner or perhaps a more visual person, if I'm honest with you, I tend to be, then you can use color and arrows. If you just notice, I've got this small box here that says something is linked by theory. I can make, a spider diagram can perhaps be that little bit more complex if you can remember it. That's the thing. It's got to be something that you can remember. And there's color here. There's, different things that might help you kind of remember that. But the important thing is, can you rewrite it when you go in? That's the important thing. So it's either a read wrote thing, or it's like this. Or it's a mind map. So let's look at about unpacking. So we've packed it up, and we've gone into the exam and a question's come up about international marketing strategy. So the first thing you do, obviously, is you write it out again. So from memory, I'm able to unpack all that information and I come up with this. But the really important thing you can see here is I've only got to remember 20 words that will give me 12 paragraphs of really useful information to answer a question. So I've boiled down 12 paragraphs into 20 words, and that's only those 20 words that I need to remember going into the exam, because everything else will follow from it once I'm in. So I immediately write that out again and have a look, and then from that I can construct my answer once I see the question. So say we've got a question, and the way that question reads, I've decided that from the 12 paragraphs I have, I need paragraphs 1, 2, 5 and 6, 9 and 10. Okay, for whatever reason, it doesn't really matter. The important thing is that perhaps I don't need all the paragraphs, but I need some of them for whatever reason, because that question is written in a certain way. I'm not going to use all the paragraphs that I've used, but the important thing is I'm going to have all the paragraphs I need for any question. That's the important thing. Let's imagine there's another form of the question. So although the area is still the same and the area will have a question, between exams, what is involved in the question may change. And what I want to do now is to look at an imagining for another question. So let's imagine we've stepped into a parallel universe and the exact same exam's going on, but the question is slightly different. And to answer this slightly different question, these are the most appropriate paragraphs. So in this this one, it's paragraphs 2, 3, 4, and 6, 7, and 8. They all, in my mind, contain what I need to answer that question. So we have different paragraphs because they are more suitable or more appropriate to answer that question. At this point, it is useful to say that the additional benefit of doing things this way are not only do you have the content to hand, but you also have the structure of your essay to hand, so that you could go through, once you've determined that these are the ones you're going to need, that possibly you're going to do this paragraph first, this paragraph second, this paragraph third, this paragraph fourth, this paragraph fifth, this paragraph sixth. So you know the order and the content. So you know the structure of your essay and you know how you're going to write it before you start. And I would say that for any exam, find that you're writing off the cuff and you're writing as things come to you because you're under that time pressure. So the two really important benefits that this gives you is, one, you've got the prompts that hopefully allude you to most or all of what is in each paragraph, but also you can work out beforehand which order these paragraphs are going to run in. So that's another benefit. So it doesn't matter what the question is, you will have paragraphs that should be able to answer that question. And not only that, you can determine the structure as well. Now, the next thing I want to show you is that because of the way that I've done this revision, that I've broken down area A into 12 parts, is that we can now look and see that the things I have marked here in blue, okay, were used to answer the first question specifically. The parts I've labelled yellow were particularly to answer the second question. And importantly, the parts marked in green were used to answer both questions. You will find that there will be a body of paragraphs that are probably going to make it into any form of the question. So there'll be essential things that will be part of any answer. And then there will be peripheral points that you make that may or not answer a particular question. So you'll have the core things that probably won't change, and you'll have peripheral paragraphs that may change depending on the question. And interestingly, for some reason in this one, for either of those questions, there was two paragraphs that I didn't use, paragraphs. Paragraph 11 and paragraph 12 I didn't use. But my argument would be is there's a form of the question that wasn't used this time that would need me to use parts 11 and 12. So again, just to make this point again, you will take in more paragraphs or parts or information than you will need for any one question. But you'll have a varying amount of information enough to answer any question or any form of question, and that's important. At this point, I think it's useful to say that once you have produced your cards for each element in a module, so if you have 3 areas in a module that you're revising, you should end up with 3 cards with information on them. Little sayings, little phrases, or pieces of information that allude to a paragraph. When you have those cards, you don't stop and say, well, that's me done. I'll just put these cards in and roll on the exam. Everything's going to be fine. One of the important things to help you remember is repetition and construction. And what I mean by that is that you practice writing out each card repeatedly so that eventually you can write out that card with very little prompting because it's in your long-term memory. It's been rehearsed that often, it's internalized, and therefore coming up with or recalling it becomes much easier. And the other thing is that as well as that, you practice writing out each paragraph repeatedly. And arguably the way to do that is to pick out one element at a time. So it just happened to be element, one paragraph at a time, and practice writing it up. So I could look at my card and I could say, let's look at benefit 2, and I'll try and recreate that paragraph from memory. Now, the great thing is all these paragraphs have been written out. So once you've tried to rewrite it, you can compare it with what you should have. And this gives you a really good indication of how well the revising's going, because, for example, if you can recreate the card in front of you here that you can see on this slide, and you can do it whenever you want, and you can recall all the cards for one module, and you write them without missing anything, then your revision's going really well and you're getting there. Whereas if you try to rewrite the card and you only get 4 out of the 12 or 5 out of the 12, then you immediately know you've got more revising, more repetition, more work to be done. So it's a really empirical way, a kind of measurable way of seeing where you are. The same goes for the paragraph. You'll have the paragraphs written out and you can compare them if you try to write one. So say if I try to say dual limitations and I try and do that paragraph and then I compare it, if I can see that it's mostly there, then I know my revision's going well and I'm getting there. If it's not, then I know I have to do more work. So it's really beneficial to do that. The final point I want to make is about question deconstruction. It's really important that what you answer in the exam is relevant to the question you've been asked. And you've got to be able to understand and deconstruct questions so that you know with a good degree of accuracy what you've to do. So I've taken, again, funnily enough, it's an international marketing strategy question. Here's the question. I'll just talk you through it and I'll show you and pinpoint the important parts. So it says here, the direction of fashion retailer expansion has been the subject of much academic attention. That's, to be honest, that's doesn't really have much to do with the answer, but it's just an introduction to the question. It's the following sentence that becomes really appropriate. And what I've done is the parts that are in bold, the things that you should know about, and the things that are in red are what you have been asked to do. So it says here, with appropriate use of both theory and examples, critically explore the patterns in the direction of international expansion and how these have changed over time. And the parts in red really indicate what they're wanting from the information. So you know there's going to be theory about international expansion. There's going to be examples of international expansion in here. But the important thing is you have to critically explore the patterns and you have to show how they change. Once you understand that, you can say critically explore the patterns. You look to your paragraphs and you say, where's the paragraphs that I've written up that explain those patterns, that explore them, that are critical about them, that talk about the strengths and weaknesses? And where are the paragraphs that show me the changes that have been made, changes in the dominance of one pattern over another, one method over another, and perhaps what's caused these changes? There should be paragraphs sitting there waiting for you to say, these are the paragraphs I used to answer how they've changed, and these are the paragraphs with examples and the theory that explore the patterns. And then you very quickly get the structure and off you go. Another quick point I want to make about rewriting paragraphs is it is far more beneficial to you for an exam than reading notes. This is the key thing that elevates repetition and rewriting, because rewriting is active and it involves construction. In other words, you have to make things come out the end of your pen to rewrite a paragraph, so you are cognitively active. You're creating words, you're linking words together, you're creating a paragraph. Although it's from memory, you still have to go through it, so you will build up and reinforce memories. You will be continually making synapses fire in your brain, which is a really, really good way of reinforcing and making it memorable, which, as I said, was one of the main points, making it memorable. And rewriting does that far more than reading. Reading is passive. It doesn't involve construction like rewriting does. So that's a major benefit. And I just wanted to make that point. That's why it's good to rehearse things, because you're literally going through the exact thing you may be doing in the exam. So it's a form of rehearsal. I just want to briefly mention some other strategies that you can improve your memory. So practice the knowing, practice the having the knowledge at your fingertips. So the first one is using post-it notes, and what you would do with those is you would put these up on the wall around the house, maybe where you make a coffee in the morning or on the door, so you see them on the door as you're leaving the house. And what I would recommend is on those post-it notes, you put some questions that when you answer those questions, you're saying something to do with a paragraph or some part of an answer. So the question might be, what are the 3 benefits of international strategy? And you just think about that in your head, and you just run it through in your head, and you try and come up with the 3 benefits. Or what are 2 weaknesses in, or what are the main elements of. And that way, you're forcing. Questions are really good because, again, they force you to construct an answer rather than reading an answer, which is passively taking an answer in. So anything that promotes construction or thinking, verbalizing, or writing what you need to know is much better at reinforcing and making it more memorable. If we weren't in COVID, I would recommend quizzes that, bear with me with this, that if you're in a module, you could arrange a quiz for other students on the course. And what you would do is you would make up questions to do with the module. And you would have a quiz, and friends would come round and you would have the quiz. I suppose you could still have a Zoom quiz. That way, there you go, get round to COVID. The benefits to you as the person preparing the quiz is you have to prepare the questions, but you also have to prepare the answers. So again, you're rehearsing. The rehearsal is there for you, and it helps reinforce and helps you memorize what's going on, what's in an answer. But the other thing is, at least the people taking part in the quiz, if they do well, they know that their revision's going well and they seem to have the knowledge at their fingertips. And if the quiz doesn't go well for them and they come last, then they know they've got a pile of revision to do. So it's a useful check-in for the people taking the quiz, but it's very useful for the person that creates the quiz. The final one is our phones. Most of the smartphones people have can record your voice. So there's two ways you can use it. One is you can listen to it, you can record answers and record paragraphs, and then you can listen to them. Again, that you have a question, you sit down with a question and you record your answer. You just speak the answer in, which is less laborious than writing, but still useful. And then what you do at the end is you play the recording back and you look at the prepared answers you have and see how much you remember. So these are all about reinforcement, and I think they're useful. Now, the final one for memorizing is mnemonics. You'll see here I've got two of the most common, most well-known mnemonics, SWOT and PEST. Now, SWOT is short for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And it's a kind of situational analysis. The other one is PEST, which is political, economic, social, and technological, which again is a way of remembering the factors that may affect a business. Now, no matter how old I get or how weak my memory gets, I think there's a fair chance that I'll remember what both SWOT and PEST mean. And I think there's an opportunity for you to make your own mnemonics to represent parts of your card. So when you have your revision card, instead of 4 words, you could have 4 letters, as long as you rehearse that mnemonic as well. And that's really, you can't get much more brief or concise than a mnemonic. Okay, let's look at mnemonics and see what makes a good mnemonic. Now, the first one I would say is not a good mnemonic, because it's a pretty random selection of letters, which asks you to basically remember a group of letters in some kind of random, which makes it more difficult. What you could do, change the order of the letters. Suddenly you come up with VGCD, very good CD, and then that's a very good CD. But what I'm saying is there is a more memorable order to the letters that might be better for you to remember the 4 words represented by the letters. The other 2 mnemonics on this page are very memorable because they make up a word. So if you can remember the word, like pest, like SWAT, if you can remember the word, then you'll have the letters because you can spell out the word because it's way more memorable and you can, it doesn't need to be a real word as long as it forms a kind of pronounceable word, then you're there. And there's a couple of examples there of mnemonics that you could use. When it comes to using the knowledge, practice using the knowledge, if you have access to past papers, there's two things you can do. You can look for patterns within past papers, and you can identify areas that inform the question. So when you look for patterns, what I'm saying is, are there subjects that tend to come up all the time? Are there subjects that come in and drop out year on year? Is it always the same areas? Is there differences between? So you might be able to spot things that give you a help about which areas you should revise. And the other one is that when you look at the questions, that helps you understand the area of the module that's been looked at. So that when we go back to the revision and you're going back to breaking down a module into areas, when you look at exam questions, you'll be able to identify the area in the module from the question. And that allows you to study that area. As I said, you study the area, not the question, but the questions are really useful for you to understand which area of the module is being represented. Final thing, of course, with past papers is you can practice deconstructing questions. You can practice looking at questions and saying, how would I answer that? What's the kind of information I'm going to need for that question? How would I break it down? Could I answer it? And that's really useful. So it's really useful for practicing using the knowledge. Exactly what I say with that, take a question and practice using your paragraphs to see if your paragraphs work and see how effective they are at answering any given question. To the point that you could set up a part mock exam. So you could take the questions you have, fold them up, put them in a hat, and pick one at random, which means you're not aware of what question's going up, so you're having the whole surprise element. You don't know what you're going to be asked to answer, and that allows you to practice reacting to the question that comes out. And then you can also practice and sit down and say, right, how am I going to answer this? How am I going to practice writing out the card, practice looking up, getting which paragraphs you're going to use, in what order you're going to use them, and just go through the whole process. You don't need to do the whole exam, but you can practice a part of it. And again, you're practicing writing, so all of these different benefits come from doing that. And finally, using the knowledge, if you revise in groups and you discuss what might be in an answer and you discuss questions and you discuss the content, that's really good. That's really good for building your understanding. So I would always advise revising in groups if possible. I know that discussion for me was really helpful because it may be that some person understands one part of a module and has a way of explaining it that really helps you click and really helps you understand. That's us for the first part. And this has been the prep. This has all been about the prep. In the next part 2 of exams, we're going to look at on the day, what you can do and think about for the actual day of your exams. Okay, thanks for listening.